good morning and good evening for everyone who is attending. So today we will be discussing the path forward. So if you want to advance beyond GA4 and move towards warehouse-based analytics, how you can do so using the likes of Snowplow. But to set the stage, I won't itself. It looks like Phil did a pretty good job. But yeah, I'm a solutions engineer here at Snowplow. I've been at the business for about 2.5 years. Moving into the agenda today, we'll be looking at some of the challenges associated with Google Analytics. From there, we'll look at a few specific examples of that and how that might affect your current state of affairs. Moving on then, we'll be looking at Snowplow and the benefits of that warehouse-first approach. And thereafter, we'll take a look at Snowplow's architecture and move into a demo. Following on from that, we'll look at a customer story from one of our customers, Trinny London, who are a e-commerce-based makeup company. So Google Analytics and some of the challenges that are commonly faced by many today. There's 6 main challenges that I want to call out, specifically around when Google Analytics users are perhaps a little bit more mature in their journey. To begin with, we'll talk about that vendor lock-in with Google BigQuery, whereby should you wish to ultimately analyze that data outside of Google Analytics, you are forced to export it via BigQuery. And should you then want to export it onto further data warehouses, for example, whether that be Snowflake or Databricks, for example, there's going to be significant costs associated with doing so. There are significant limitations in some of the data that you can collect. Specifically, one issue that I see a lot of our customers complaining about is the limitations, the amount of properties that can be sent with individual events. And there's significant issues associated with visibility and restrictions around governance. What we also see from customers that have migrated over is that they commonly took issue with the lack of real-time streaming from the Google Analytics platform, meaning that they were unable to unlock more real-time use cases, whether that be real-time personalization, real-time recommendations, or perhaps just looking to perform attribution modeling, in a more in a less latent scale. If we move further down, there's no data quality control and monitoring built into Google Analytics, and as a result, this means that if you've had tracking implemented in a poor quality manner, there'll be significant data engineering effort required to cleanse that data and potentially unpick some of that GA logic once the data is ultimately landed within the warehouse. And for users that are still using GA4 and haven't migrated to the warehouse, you'll probably be aware of the fact that the attribution model that you are basing the performance of your channels and campaigns on is largely black box. And this means you're unable to see any of the underlying logic that is producing that various performance across your digital estate. And this can ultimately be confusing for marketers where they don't have a good understanding still, regardless of the tooling that they're using, of actually which campaign is performing best where, due to the nature of the black box modeling. And then, of course, there's data processing concerns, whereby, for example, if you're operating within a GDPR compliant region, some of that data, it might be getting processed in servers in California, for example. And that means that that end-to-end data is likely to have a significantly longer journey than you perhaps would like. So a customer journey can be broken off into many different interactions that are made. Here's a basic example of a user that might be looking to purchase a particular product from an e-commerce brand, for example. What you can see here is 2 distinct user journeys, one where a user searches for some particular products, but ultimately they don't convert. They leave something within their basket. Now, there's a period of inactivity here where the user performs no activity for several days, and then ultimately they'll come back in and purchase a product. Now, depending on that time frame, will largely depend on whether Google Analytics interprets this user as being 2 users or 1 user. If it is a significantly longer period, then ITP regulations will ensure that the cookie associated with Google Analytics is reset, meaning that these 2 sessions that a user has made will actually look more like 2 users performing 1 singular session. And this can be particularly challenging, given that one singular user's journey is interpreted as being two people. And this means that when you're looking to perform use cases on top of this data, you're getting incorrect results on top of that. Another common challenge associated with the use of GA4, and this is specifically with relevance to exporting that data to BigQuery, and then ultimately egressing it out to further data platforms, whether that be Snowflake or Databricks or Redshift, for example, is the increasing cost associated with doing so. And this starts to add up quite significantly when you're dealing with a large volume of events. HelloFresh recently released an article on their blog around the use of BigQuery and how it's become very profound and costly for them, where they're processing significant amounts of data and it's resulting in significant costs associated with doing so. So this is where Snowplow comes in. And there are some of the benefits here associated with moving to a warehouse-first analytics approach. The first one I'll talk to here is around this warehouse-first data that connects all touch points. When we're using the warehouse as a singular source of truth, it's very easy to integrate that behavioral data that you're collecting via Google Analytics or Snowplow with other sources, for example. And then should you then want to send that data to further destinations down the line, you can do so using the likes of a reverse ETL tool, for example. So having the warehouse as a singular source of truth enables you to create that customer 360 where you can combine and join all of those different data sources with ease. Because of Snowplow's streaming technology, we're also able to adopt and utilize real-time use cases. As an example, with BigQuery and Snowflake, we are able to deliver validated and enriched data in its raw atomic format in 3 to 5 seconds. Snowplow is a GDPR compliant solution, or at least it can be if used correctly, whereby you can integrate with consent management platforms with ease, and you can only initiate tracking once the user has consented, for example. We also do offer some anonymous tracking capabilities when a user does not provide consent. Additionally, on this piece, whereby you can set up the Snowplow pipeline in a region of your choice, which means that data can be processed in region. Additionally, one final thing I'll touch on before we go any further is the first-party cookies that look to live longer. The first-party cookies that are set via Snowplow are done on the server as opposed to on the client side. And this means that we're able to circumvent ITP regulations, and as such, cookies can last up to 400 days. And this means that should a user take 2 journeys to convert, and there be a significant period of time between them, they'll be interpreted as being one singular user and not 2. So what I'm going to do now is dive into a demo, and we'll start by taking a look at the architecture of Snowplow. I'll demo some basic tracking capabilities. We'll look at some of our models, and then subsequently look at some of the applications that we've developed to the right-hand side of the warehouse in order to visualize some of this data. So to begin, what we'll do is take a look at the architecture. So here on the screen, you can divide this into 4 different sections: the sources, the collection, the storing of the data, and ultimately the reporting. To begin with, on the left-hand side, we will discuss sources. So Snowplow offers 35 different software development kits and webhooks that allow you to integrate Snowplow tracking across your entire digital estate. This can be done either natively via our trackers within the code base, or done using a tag management solution such as Google Tag Manager. Now, once the data has been created, it's then collected and subsequently sent through the Snowplow pipeline. There are 2 important distinctions that I'd make at this point around the deployment model of this pipeline. The first being that this pipeline can be deployed in a private SaaS configuration. And that means that regardless of whether you are on AWS, GCP, or Azure, we can host the entire pipeline infrastructure inside your own cloud sub-account. And this means you can truly get end-to-end ownership of the data. We do offer another deployment model whereby we have a SaaS model, and that means that we would host the pipeline architecture on your behalf and then simply load that data in real time to one of these destinations, whether that be BigQuery, Snowflake, Databricks, or Amazon Redshift, for example. Within this pipeline, there's two main components that I'll discuss, that being the validation and the enrichment. Validation is where we would validate data that we've created at source against specific criteria. And this means that should data be of the incorrect format and it doesn't abide to that criteria that you have dictated, it will be subject to fail validation. Now, if it fails validation, that doesn't mean that this data is lost. That means the data will ultimately land within a failed events bucket and then can be corrected and reprocessed. And this ensures that we don't have a lossy pipeline and ensures that all data that is created at source ultimately will end up within that end destination. After this validation phase, we can also perform some basic enrichment. So as an example, we can do first-party and third-party based enrichments to look up geographical information based upon a user's IP address. But here, as an example, we can also do PII pseudonymization, whereby if data doesn't want to be, if you don't want to store data in raw format inside the warehouse, you can hash it and obfuscate it in order to do so. We also offer campaign attribution enrichments where you can parse out UTM parameters, for example, and bot detection at this stage. So those are some of the basic enrichments, but we also offer some more custom ones, whereby you could look at running JavaScript enrichments on top of the data, API requests, for example, as well. Now, once the data has been validated and enriched, it will then be loaded into your end destination in real time or close to, depending on the destination. And this is where we can then look to model the data using some of our DBT models. Now, Snowplow offers several models. I've just highlighted four for today that I'll talk about briefly. The first being the unified model. The unified model essentially allows you to create more customer 360 type use cases by joining data based upon user identifiers across your website and mobile applications. Should you then want to do attribution modeling for marketing-based use cases, you can also do so based upon our attribution model. We also offer an e-commerce model should you want to understand the user's journey and cart interactions, purchases, etc. And a media model could be utilized here if you want to understand user consumption of videos and advertisements across your digital estate. Now, once that data has been modeled, you could then look to visualize that using a BI tool for all of your use cases. Or alternatively, we do now offer some data applications that I'll be demoing today for some of these basic use cases. One thing to note before I move on is that we do offer a real-time stream. And as such, you could hook up a Google Tag Management server-side container on top of this real-time stream and ultimately send the Snowplow data onto Google Analytics 4. And this means that should you have people within the company that don't want to move away from consuming data via Google Analytics dashboarding, you can still look to utilize Snowplow regardless. So the first thing I'll do now as we move through the demo is look at some basic tracking. What you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen is a basic demo e-commerce site that I've set up for a snowboard store. And on the right-hand side, this is what we call the Snowplow Inspector, and this is designed to visualize events as they are being created in real time. Now, what I'm going to do is refresh the page just to start this off. So having done so, you can see this event that's just been fired is a page view. And what you can see thereafter firing is these further page pings. These page pings are designed to measure my engagement with the page, whereby as I look to scroll through specific collections of snowboards, we can then look to aggregate these page pings inside the warehouse to get an understanding of how long I've been browsing and engaged with this particular page. Whilst I've been talking, we can see that 6 page pings have now fired whilst I've been on the home page. So we can aggregate those up, say that they fire every 10 seconds to get a good understanding that I've been interacting now for 80 seconds on the web page. As I look to perform some further interactions, I might look to look at this particular tier, and we can see some further events that have just been fired. Here we can see a product view event that's been fired. I could then subsequently add this product to my cart, and we can see further events. What you'll notice is across these events on the right-hand side, we've got some core properties that are also being sent, but we've also got these things called entities, which we've attached to these events. An entity here is essentially if the event itself is the the interaction. This is the what and the how. So this is I interacted with this product, I added it to my cart, I did a view, and this is who did it. This is the user, this is the user ID, etc. And you can add these entities in a modular fashion, such that if you need to add an additional property to several different events, you don't need to do it for all of those events. You merely need to do it once across these entities. So having created some basic tracking and visualized that, what I'll now do is show you some of that validation criteria that this has been tracked against. If I move into the Snowplow console, what we can see here is a basic data product that I've set up. And this is for that e-commerce use case. We've got some different event specifications, such as add to cart, checkout step, etc. Let's focus on the add to cart for now. If I click into the add to cart, we can see that we should have this event data structure for the Snowplow e-commerce action. And you can see subsequently those entities that have been attached to the event. If I click on this product entity, what we can see here is some of those validation criteria that the event has been validated against. This means that if we sent through an ID that wasn't of type string and it wasn't of this validation criteria, the event would be subject to fail. And we could then look to reprocess that and repair it at a later time. So having validated the data, we can also look to enrich that. And following enrichment, we would then look to load that. And once loading it, we can then visualize it within BigQuery. So once the data has been validated and enriched and loaded, it will land in a table in BigQuery known as the atomic events table. We can also land data natively inside Snowflake, Databricks, and Redshift as well. But once the data is inside BigQuery, as an example, it lands in an atomic events table. And this means that regardless of whether the data was created via a mobile application or via a web source, it's going to land in the same table. And this means that there's significantly less joins that need to be done further down the line if you want to add all of these different sources together. Now, Snowplow does offer 130 properties out of the box, but you can add as many properties on top of that via our entities or just attached as properties to the individual events. What you can see here is some of that data landing in real time. This timestamp is in UTC. I'm currently in the UK, which is 1 hour ahead. So if I just run this now, we can see some of those new events that will have landed. So there we go. We can see some of those new events. What we can also see is, if I just scroll down a little bit here, we can see some of these event names. So we can see that Snowplow e-commerce action that I just performed, the add to cart event. We can also see a user ID associated with the user, email, etc. If I scroll further to the right-hand side, we can see a user IP address. Now, in this example, I've chosen to obfuscate it using that PII pseudonymization enrichment that I was talking about. One column to the right-hand side of that, we've got this network user ID, and this is that first-party server set cookie that I alluded to. And this cookie can last up to 400 days, which means that regardless of how long a customer journey took before ultimately converting, we can see all of those touch points. We've got a session ID here associated with a particular session, and we can aggregate on top of that to get an understanding of all events that took place during that time. Slightly different to GA, you can configure this to expire after any amount of inactivity you wish. It also doesn't reset at midnight, conversely to GA4, for example. Further to the right, I've done an IP lookups enrichment on my geographical location, such that we can determine my country and the city I'm located in at the moment. I've also been able to determine that I wasn't a spider nor bot when navigating the websites using a bot enrichment. And if I scroll a little bit further down, we can see here that I've taken those URL, UTM parameters rather, that were in the URL, and I've passed those out such that I can then start to do attribution modeling based upon that, should I look to convert based upon this marketing campaign or potentially on this channel, for example. So that's the data as it lands within its raw format. And one thing you'll notice is the simplicity of the queries in order to visualize this data. I've just looked to add all of these additional data points and those entities associated with this data. But I can also just look to create models based on top of that using the raw data itself. And just here's an example. I can just pull up a very quick query based upon the amount of users that have added a particular product to their cart in a given time period. But if we did want to utilize some of Snowplow's models, here we can utilize Snowplow's e-commerce model that's fully transparent and available on DBT, and we can look to understand when a user converted and the amount of sessions it took, just as an example. If I move one to the right-hand side, we're also able to see conversions based upon our attribution models, and here we can attribute specific revenue associated with different paths that a user may have taken before ultimately converting. Using those UTM parameters within the campaign attribution enrichment that I did here, we can also look to understand the amount of channels that have been generated as a result of sessions rather that have been generated as a result of all of these different channels. Now, once the data has landed in the warehouse, we've created it, we've validated it, we've enriched it, we've loaded it to BigQuery, Snowflake, Databricks, or Redshift, and we've then modeled it here using the attribution model and the e-commerce model. This is when we can look to actually build on top of it using some of our native applications. For the purposes of today, given that we are constrained to time, I'll only be showing two of them, but we've built out to this date an attribution model, data application. We've built out an e-commerce analytics data app, a funnel building app, and a user and marketing analytics application. The e-commerce analytics application, user and marketing analytics, will be very familiar to users of the Google Analytics platform, as they were built to replicate a lot of those same dashboards and visualizations that you currently have today. So for now, we'll show you the attribution modeling dashboard, and then subsequently we'll move into funnel building. So in the attribution dashboard, this reads data directly from my data warehouse, such that I can easily get a quick understanding of my return on ad spend, for example. If I wanted to here, I could also add in spend source data directly from the warehouse. And if you follow a simple schema, this will give you that return on ad spend across all of these different sources. What I can also do is look to understand a user's path to completion before they ultimately converted. And if I filter this to remove paths that only had one touch point, what I can then ultimately do is take a look at users that had multiple different paths before ultimately converting. So here we can see all of those different touch points and all of those different channels and campaigns that a user utilized before ultimately purchasing a product, for example. Now on the left-hand side, we can change this to look at first touch, last touch, position-based, and linear across the attribution overview slide. But if we wanted to look at those model comparisons side by side, we can do so within the model comparison dashboard here. And having done so, we're able to understand the performance of different models that we've created within the UI here. One thing I'll also add is, although out of the box, we only have first touch, last touch, linear, and position-based models built via our DBT transparent modeling, you can also add additional ones within here, and our professional services team would be happy to help with doing so. Having looked at attribution, what I'd now look to understand is the journey of a user through my funnel. So let's say with this particular use case, I want to understand the amount of users that started on the homepage, for example, clicked on a product to their cart, and then ultimately went to checkout. And I wanted to visualize that to get an understanding of where I might be getting drop-offs. That's the perfect utilization of the funnel building tool. So here what I've done is I've set up some basic criteria where I've set up a particular date window of data I'm looking to look over. I can set a particular application ID, such as if I want to look at this specific Shopify shop, or if I want to look at a mobile application, for example. Then I can set up different steps, such as a product list view, a product view, an add to cart interaction, and a checkout step. And I can visualize that data very easily on the right-hand side in order to get an understanding of where user counts are starting to drop across those different funnel steps. I can further filter that based upon geographical country here, meaning that I can get a good understanding of drop-offs across different regions as well. What you can also do here is you could look to perform A/B tests. So you could look at how one funnel might be performing compared to another, if you've done some experimentation, for example, or you could also equally look to understand the propensity for a user to purchase a product, depending on which channel or campaign their session started on. So all of that feature and functionality can be built into the funnel here. The visualizations we have here, so we've got a user counts based on funnel step. If we scroll a little bit further down, we can see funnel conversion rates visualized as moving from 100% down to, say, 53% completion rate for GB. And we can also look at the abandonment rate at each step. This data can be summarized, but I think one really important feature to note on the funnel builder specifically is the ability to download the SQL associated with this funnel. And once you've downloaded it, you could then utilize this elsewhere within the business, either natively using the warehouse, and then you could build out specific UIs using your BI tool on top of this as well. So before we close out, what I'd like to do is move back into the slideware and just go over some of our customers to date. So here's an example of some of the customers that we've worked with, and a large proportion of these customers have looked to move away from Google Analytics and ultimately towards more warehouse native analytics. Specifically today, we'll be taking a look at Trinny London. So Trinny London came over to us with a simple use case. They were simply looking to improve their marketing attribution and become more GDPR compliant. And they look to do that by replacing Google Analytics with Snowplow. So Trinny had some issues associated with creating all of these different touch points across their digital estate, and they used Snowplow's tracking in order to embed that therein. Because of Snowplow's long-lasting server-set cookies, they were able to create a more accurate view on their multi-touch marketing attribution. And the technology itself easily fitted into their current tech stack, where they were also already looking to export data from GA4 to BigQuery. And Trinny London, it's worth noting, they are deployed within our private SaaS model, whereby they have the pipeline infrastructure in their own environment. And they did this such that they could maintain end-to-end ownership of the data and ensure that they can be GDPR compliant in the long term as these regulations start to get stricter and stricter. That is everything I'm intending on showing for today. I'm going to open up the floor to questions. I can see that there's been a few in the chat. If anyone's got any additional questions, please ask in the Q&A.
Hi, Freddie. I'll ask a question. So we encountered this with so we're based near Bristol. So there's a client called Just Eat that actually were originally on GA360 and then moving over to Snowplow. And I think they were partly on a kind of Amazon sort of stack. But would you say, does it matter if like the clients are on a Google stack or Amazon stack? Can it work on both, or is there anything that makes it a kind of a better fit?
It's a good question. I would say no. Snowplow, we've been operational since 2012. We did start with just AWS, but we've expanded our pipeline architecture to cover GCP and Azure as well today. There's no major benefit associated with any of those architectures. That we have the same feature set across all of those different cloud providers. Okay, and one other random question. I heard on the rumor mill that Amazon might buy Snowplow. Is that was that because in the sense that Google seems to be kind of buying up HubSpot recently, or at least making an offer for it, just to get access to kind of that first-party data, or like Amazon has its kind of own kind of tracker. Is there any chance Amazon might buy Snowplow and make it free for everyone? I think that in the long term, no. I would say that given that we have a lot of customers across both AWS, GCP, and Azure trying to purchase Snowplow and sticking it on one singular platform. They would lose a lot of their customer base. Acquisition isn't something that we're looking at for now, so I would say no.
Okay, cool. And just see if there's any other questions in chat. I did also put your LinkedIn profile into chat, which, so if people have got kind of more technical questions, they can ask you. I think it's kind of one of the ones where, like where you've got your solution architecture, it's kind of like, it's good to kind of actually do like a one-to-one discussion, and it's like, okay, we've got this problem, how would you solve it? Or like kind of building a solution based off something similar. So I'll put your or in fact, if I put your, Will, if you want to put if it's okay, Freddie, is it okay to put your email into chat?
Yeah, absolutely. Please feel free to put my company email into chat, and yeah, we can discuss further. We can go through a solution design, and we can look to solution any specific issues that you have, and maybe look to replace Google Analytics for something that you're curious about in the future.
And have you I know there was a big kind of sort of flood of companies switching almost a year ago when sort of GA3 kind of hit end of life. Are you seeing like another kind of trend? Everyone, like, they've been using GA4 for almost a year, and like kind of you know, not a bit like Cinderella sort of thing, as in, is it a perfect fit sort of thing? So is it like, as that's time has gone by, and have you seen more people kind of move away from GA3 and GA4 to Snowplow?
Yeah, I would say so. I think GA4 promised a lot to a lot of people moving away from GA3, and in a lot of aspects they perhaps haven't delivered as people had expected. So we are seeing an influx of customers looking to migrate away at the moment. Yes.
Well, yeah, I think it's also the fact that GA4 doesn't have feature parity. GA3 doesn't help. So
Absolutely.
okay, great. Well, I've put your LinkedIn profile in chat and an email on there. So maybe if people want to kind of ask you like difficult technical questions directly, maybe they're a bit shy to ask on a call, especially if it's like a banking client or something like that. One person has asked the question: is there a sandbox type environment to learn Snowplow?
Yeah. So Snowplow we have many different resources that you can look to utilize in order to gain a better understanding of Snowplow. I would direct you to our documentation firstly. But if you're looking to trial Snowplow, I'd recommend requesting a demo, and then we can talk about that in further detail.
Cool. And oops, yeah, I think I've just put the link to the demo into chat. Freddie, for that talk, that's really interesting, and definitely it's always good to have kind of other options, and it's also good to kind of own the data, so, and have complete flexibility and control over it. So that's hopefully that's been useful for attention. Okay, thank you again for doing that talk.